Bomb, 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 Iran. Welcome to the Elephant in the Room with Bradley Devlin. Of course, I am Bradley Devlin, and if you couldn't get the hint, we will be talking a little bit of Trump's statement made yesterday morning about the Iranian situation and how it's developing, or how it's going to lack any more developments, is what it's signaling. But at the same time, I'm recording this early. Things can definitely change. But first, I need to apologize to all of my listeners out there. Sorry, I left the last episode saying that I would be back in 2 weeks. And you sat there and you waited 2 weeks and nothing happened. And then you sat there and waited another 2 weeks and nothing happened. And that is because I forgot to tell you, we were going on Christmas break, of course. After that episode, 2 weeks from then was my finals dates. And then, of course, we all went on a long winter's break, had ourselves a long winter's nap. And now this semester, this spring 2020 semester, is heating back up. So today we're going to cover Iran. We're going to do some campus craziness, which breaks down some of the crazy things that conservative students had to endure on campus in 2019 and what conservative student strategy should be going into the election year in 2020, as well as a phenomenal How About That highlight from Nick Samarco. We're going to be breaking down his predictions for 2020, as well as a Warrior of the Week that will make you want to go to Facebook and donate to his cause. He is doing phenomenal work. But before we get into all of that, as I said, spring 2020 semester is starting up, and that means that YAF lectures are coming back to your campuses and campuses near you. So definitely keep an eye out at www.yaf.org/events. That's www.yaf.org/events. One of those YAF lecture events on campus happening in the near future is Mia Love at the University of Virginia. Yes, former Congresswoman and female conservative champion Mia Love will be giving a lecture at the University of Virginia, courtesy of the Young America's Foundation. This event will be held in Caruthers Hall and is free to the public on January 22nd at 7 p.m. So if you're interested in that event specifically, go to www.yaf.org/events/Mia-Love- at the University of Virginia. Make sure to visit that event if you are in the Virginia area, and make sure you keep going to YAF lectures across the country when they're at schools near you. Help your other conservative students at other colleges and the conservative organizations that give so much of their time and resources to preparing you to be the best activist that you can on your campus. All right, speaking of the college campus and YAF's lectures on campus, there's a lot of drama surrounding YAF lectures on campus in 2019, as well as drama throughout the country on college campuses, specifically the left going berserk, not just at Berserkly, on conservative students. And so for this edition of Campus Craziness, we are going to be talking about a campus reform article that highlights what conservative students had to deal with in 2019, brought to us by Caroline Shaver over at Campus Reform. As I said, she is from North Carolina and she is a campus correspondent, so definitely give her work a check out over at Campus Reform. So one of the major events that made headlines with regards to conservative mistreatment on the college campus was a self-identified teacher being caught on camera berating conservative students at the University of Iowa. So this man, who identified himself as a faculty member by saying, "I teach here," to TPUSA tablers, shouted obscenities at those TPUSA chapter members. According to Campus Reform, while the chapter was tabling in order to recruit new members, the teacher debated them on socialism and gun control. Eventually, the self-identified faculty member became very, very heated, and he told the club, "You're spouting rhetorical BS," and he didn't say BS, he said the full thing, "that you're pulling out of your $. Let's just say that. All while failing to answer the basic questions about the nature of assault rifles that Turning Point USA members were forwarding to him. Later in the video, the teacher can be seen telling the students, "I don't want to hear this Trump BS. I'm not going to be nice about this anymore." The man was later identified by students as teaching assistant Christopher Clow Hunter. Now, usually these teaching assistants are like graduate students who get all high and mighty because they finished undergraduate education and believe that they know everything about everything. I've had my fair share of let's say, strong-headed GSIs over at Berkeley. So I definitely sympathize with the TPUSA, University of Iowa members who had to deal with this type of childish harassment. Number 2 comes from North Carolina State University, where a son of a North Carolina GOP congressman told Campus Reform that he had been spray painted in the eye by a leftist club while trying to promote an event for his conservative club. The video shows an interaction between leftist students and Jack Bishop, son of Republican Representative Dan Bishop, and Jack got into the situation because he was spray painting in NC State's Free Expression Tunnel with his conservative club members to promote their upcoming event titled Culture Wars, when a leftist club ran over and began spray painting all over their work. Bishop stepped in front of his work to protect it and says that one of the leftist students decided to give him a brief spray in the eye. And that video is for your access on Campus Reform, so make sure to go visit this story to see all of these videos. I mean, all of these events that I'm telling you right now were caught on camera. I mean, these are how college-age leftists are acting with people watching, with individuals recording them. I mean, imagine what they're really saying about conservatives and Republicans and Donald Trump, the president of the United States, in their safe spaces where they don't have to be exposed to ideas that are different than their own. A third event that absolutely blew me away, and this video is about 7 minutes long. You really should watch the whole thing. I mean, I watched this video and I was shaking. I mean, physically shaking. I got so angry. This incident was from Binghamton University in New York, where 2 conservatives were in the midst of tabling when they were surrounded by leftists who screamed obscenities and dismantled their table, like literally threw nearly broke their table, threw their tabling materials on the ground, stomped on them, tore them up. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous. The video shows protesters screaming and closing in on 2 students. One protester repeatedly asked one of the conservative students while progressively getting into her face, "Why are you shaking? Why are you shaking? Why are you shaking?" And then finishing that statement with, "You're a effing P word." This girl, says in the video that she's shaking because it's cold outside, but I would be shaking not only out of anger, but out of genuine fear. I mean, these individuals were not being stopped by police. All police were doing were kind of getting in between the individuals, not stopping them, not, sanctioning them or anything like that, not telling them to disperse, but just kind of haphazardly asking them nicely to go away when they're actively destroying people's private property. After the incident at Binghamton University, one conservative student told Campus Reform that police warned her to have someone with you at all times. And this is the funniest part. It's like it really is a continuation of the heckler's video. Yes, be safe, have someone with you. But really what should have happened is that police officer should have said, "Hey, I'm going to bring this up to the university administration. The administration is going to take swift and severe actions against these students who are physically intimidating and destroying people's private property on campus." Which, I mean, come on. If words in the classroom that are in favor of Donald Trump is equivalent to violence and assault, then physical intimidation, harassment, and destruction of private property ought to be outlined in the school's code of conduct for things that shouldn't be allowed on campus. All right, number 4 is another video that captures the moment leftists confront campus conservatives at California State University of Chico. And this video actually is of a good friend of mine, college Republican President Michael Curry. Michael Curry and his group of CRs were tabling when a group of leftist students interrupted members of the group and proceeded to hit Michael in the face with signs. After taking down the Chico State College Republicans banner, one of the leftist protesters told CR President Michael Curry to "get the F out of my effing personal space" while hitting him in the face with a sign. Michael wasn't in her personal space. Michael was literally standing adjacent to her. She, it's funny. She was so concerned about her personal space that she got right up in his face and hit him with a sign to tell him that he was too close to her, which is just, what we've come to expect from the absurd college left these days. The protester then went into an expletive rage about her personal space before lying down and asking the police to call her an ambulance. Bravo. Bravo, institutions of higher education. You are really, really educating folks in the Greeks. I mean, really. This is what happens when educational institutions fail to teach basic civics, basic philosophy, basic morality to their students at every level, not just higher education, but high school, middle school, elementary school. I mean, this is what happens when we have a crisis of marriage, when we have a crisis of children being born out of wedlock, when we have a crisis of the left dominating every aspect of the classroom and dominating what your kids are learning about American history and American politics. And the result is that they've never been exposed to ideas that differ from their own. And when they're finally exposed to them, educational institutions and family institutions, civil society institutions have failed tremendously to prepare them to deal emotionally with what they perceive as subversion, what they perceive as an affront to their livelihood. And that's also why you're seeing so many leftist students actually advocate for socialism, right? I mean, they can't even control their own emotions, let alone the emotions or actions of other people. And therefore, the only solution to controlling not only their own emotions and reactions, and creating their own safe space, and limiting the effect that other people have on them who don't share their views, is absolute top-down control of the dissemination of information and what is acceptable in society. Parents shouldn't be concerned about their conservative children going to college and being assaulted by childish, immoral left-wingers. But this is the reality that we live in. And I'm hoping and I'm praying that that pendulum is going to swing back in the other direction. We saw a little bit of that in 2018 after 2016 and 2017 were so brutal for college Republicans and other conservative organizations across the country with regards to their members' own physical safety. And we kind of saw that dialed back in 2018, and now it's surging up again because the Mueller report ended up with nothing, and Mitch McConnell and the Republican Senate aren't going to remove President Trump from office, and they've convinced themselves that Trump is going to steal somehow the next election and see this Democratic field, and don't see a path forward to victory that involves Donald Trump not having another 4 years in office. And so their only real response is acting like children and lashing out to try to get their way, right? I mean, it's exactly like toddlers who receive poor parenting that have been trained that if they throw a big enough of a tantrum, eventually their parents are going to give in and just give them what they want. And that cannot be the case on our college campuses, in our institutions that are tasked with preparing the next generation of Americans to become proper leaders. So good on Michael for not backing down. Good on those CRs for not backing down. And speaking of another California college Republican who did not back down at Sacramento State University, a good friend of mine, Floyd Johnson, captured a violent interaction with a LGBTQ activist leftist student and told Campus Reform he felt the interaction was politically motivated. In the video, the assailant screams, "Mother effer, you're going to end up effing dead," as he verbally and physically assaults Johnson multiple times. Johnson also reports that the assailant called him an Uncle Tom after the encounter. I mean, just disgusting. I mean, here's the tolerant left, right? Here's the tolerant left. Here's an African-American student leader who has devoted his life to telling African-American voters and African-American young people about the wonderful history of the United States relative to the conditions elsewhere throughout the world, despite our deep, abiding flaws and despite the trials and tribulations that we, as an American people, but specifically, of course, the black community has gone through throughout American history. He's devoted his life to this, and he gets physically assaulted by a young white male that calls him an Uncle Tom. I mean, this is the current state of politics on the college campus. And saying it's a darn shame is really the understatement of the century. As I said before, these institutions are vital to our nation's success. And now these leftist students are in tow with an academic elite, with a political elite, with a cultural elite in Hollywood and the media that is disparaging patriotism, that is disparaging America. And here's the big reveal of all this, right? At the beginning, I told you that this piece was about everything the conservative students had to deal with in 2019. No, these are just some of the reports from November and December as the fall semester of 2019 was winding down. I mean, these types of incidents happen almost every day and certainly every week on college campuses across the country. Whether or not they're reported on, I'd say if anything happens like this to you or a friend on a college campus, tell Campus Reform. They'd love to report on it. Please message me on Twitter, message our show, message Lone Conservative. We'd love to report on it. We'd love to talk to you about it and hopefully give you a community where you can have at least some of your grievances redressed with the public. I mean, I had a good friend of mine early in 2019 full on punched in the face and assaulted. I mean, given a serious black eye on Berkeley's campus because individuals didn't like the fact that he was tabling for Turning Point USA. And that man's name was Hayden Williams. And what happened to Hayden after we got him the exposure he deserved and he received the love and support of conservative activists and conservative individuals, as well as even, I'm going to give credit where credit's due. Robert Reich emailed me and our club members, as well as Hayden, and told us that type of behavior on our campus is unacceptable. But also, he got to stand on stage with President Trump at CPAC in 2019. I mean, phenomenal things happen when we give these types of stories oxygen, the oxygen that is well deserved, because these students are putting their physical safety on the line in multiple occasions. I mean, I feel that way every single time we host a big event at UC Berkeley. Individuals at our Charlie Kirk event got arrested for trying to bring in knives. And Coulter's event this last fall that we talked about with Matt Renaud, it experienced protesters up to 2,000 people, where we were literally taken out of the building with a SWAT team while protesters surrounded us and tried to harass us. I mean, this happens habitually on college campuses. And, as we move forward in 2020, that's exactly what we need to do. We need to keep pointing out how belligerent, how insane, how absurd the left is, and how absurd the future of the Democratic Party is. How absurd the future of this new postmodern left is in the United States, to not only help President Trump win in 2020, because, let's be honest here, I don't see a Republican challenger being able to defeat President Trump in a primary, and they're probably going to put up someone like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, or Pete Buttigieg. We need to give these stories oxygen in order to help Donald Trump win in 2020. All right, with that being said, that does it for Campus Craziness this episode. Let's hope that 2020 fares better for the safety of conservative students around the country, as well as their success in knocking on doors, getting Republicans elected at every single level, from federal to municipal. So before we take a deep dive into what the president said Wednesday morning in response to Iran's missile strike that killed no Americans, thank the Lord, I want to talk to you about TPUSA's opportunity to go to conferences. Yes, those of you heard me pitch SAS all semester long in 2019, and now that SAS is over, for those of you who went, I hope you really, really enjoyed it. I heard it was phenomenal. But now, of course, they're on to another conference season, and that starts with the Young Latino Leadership Summit from April 24th through the 26th in Phoenix, Arizona. The speaker list has yet to be released, but if you are interested in attending, make sure you visit www.tpusa.com/event/Young Latino Leadership Summit. That is going to offer you some great opportunities to hear about why we need to change our messaging to Latino voters, how we can pull more Latinos who agree with us culturally on many levels into the conservative movement and activate them as conservatives moving forward. So again, if you're interested, go to www.tpusa.com/event/Young Latino Leadership Summit for more information. All right, of course, today for Bradley's breakdown, we got to talk about the situation unfolding in Iraq between Iran and the United States. So yesterday, President Trump gave a really great statement. He stayed on teleprompter, didn't take any questions, highlighted exactly how evil Soleimani was, and also assured the American people that no American lives were harmed or taken in the retaliatory strike that was much expected, anticipated by the U.S., by Iran for taking out Soleimani. So let me provide you some context before we get into his statement, because we're going to break it down in full. His statement was about 10 minutes long, so we're going to be able to get through it real quick here on Bradley's breakdown. So the argument for taking out Soleimani was to restore deterrence. If you're a parent watching this show, or you have siblings and you're a college student, maybe back in the day, you've seen your parents use deterrence on your siblings, or possibly you, or you've used it on your kids. What deterrence is basically a promise of a non-proportional response, right? We're not going to tiptoe and do this tit-for-tat game with a rogue terrorist regime. We're not going to do that, right? Your little sibling acts out, cries, hits your other, maybe hit you, hit another sibling, right? The response was not proportionate. The response was, you're going to go to timeout, we're going to take your toys away, or we're going to ground you, or whatever it may be. Basically, what it's saying is that if you act out, I will have the resources available and will be willing to use those resources to severely hamper your livelihood. And Soleimani was one of the most evil people on the planet. I mean, truly, he was a bag of walking feces who was responsible for some of the 17% of American fatalities in Iraq, who was heir apparent to the current Ayatollah. He was the head of the Quds Force and leader of the conventional terrorist army entity, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. He's the architect and sponsor of hundreds of terrorist attacks that have killed thousands of people throughout the world. He was a sponsor of the Assad regime in Syria, which the Syrian civil war has now taken half a million lives and created tons of refugees. He's the funder of terrorist organizations in Iraq, as well as Hezbollah in Lebanon, in an attempt to arm them against Israel and others in Yemen, and was apparently planning larger strikes against American assets in the region as a continuation of Iran's rogue actions. Now, reestablishing deterrence with Iran, which is a deterrence that has been strongly lacking even in the early Trump years, and especially during the Obama years, when Obama and Ben Rhodes and Obama's stupid foreign policy team literally shipped $1.8 billion in cash on planes to the Iranian regime and unfroze $150 billion of Iranian assets to appease the mullahs, which were then instantly rerouted to continue their terrorist and destabilizing actions throughout the region, by the way. I mean, I consider this, if successful, one of Trump's greatest accomplishments in office. I mean, this is a huge foreign policy win for Trump, if, of course, it is successful, and which, by reports so far that we will get into in just a second, looks like it is. Now, this deterrence that has been lacking didn't just come out of the blue. I mean, Trump didn't just wake up and decide that today was the day that he was going to kill Soleimani, push the red button, and eat ice cream while he does it, apparently. I mean, we've been trying to get Soleimani for years. The Israelis thought they were going to have him in 2014 and 2015, and the Obama administration told them to hold off. I mean, it's not like we received satellite image and at a moment's notice, we had a Predator missile inbound for the airport where Soleimani was killed. No. Beyond Iran's long campaign of making the U.S. the great Satan on the world stage, which is in line with their death to America chants that have persisted since 1979. Yes, even on the day the JCPOA, the Iranian nuclear deal, was signed, they were chanting death to America. Iran has, since the JCPOA was signed, the deal that was, you remember, this deal was supposed to normalize Iran and bring them into the community of nations. Since then, since that crucial Obama foreign policy error, the Iranian regime has taken international flag-flying ships in the Strait of Hormuz. They've shot down U.S. drones. They've ramped up their military spending and spending on their ballistic missile programs by 40% in some years. They've broken the JCPOA agreement on multiple occasions by having higher-grade enrichment assets, as well as breaking their hard water capacities. They've taken Saudi oil assets. They've continued to fund terrorism, of course, in Lebanon and Yemen, as I said before. And, of course, the most recent action that really was the final nail in the coffin for Soleimani was backing Iraqi militias to raid the U.S. embassy in Baghdad to try and kill Americans in our own embassy. Killing Soleimani is quite possibly the biggest bag of a terrorist foreign actor since Osama bin Laden. I mean, this is way bigger and more consequential than even al-Baghdadi, the terrorist leader of ISIS that Trump ended up killing in 2019. So with that context, let's get into President Trump's statement. He starts off his statement with, "As long as I am president of the United States, Iran will never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon." Good, bad news for everyone if Iran has a nuclear weapon. Even Obama realized that, gave them a stupid deal for it, but even Obama realized it. And he goes on to say, "Good morning. I'm pleased to inform you the American people should be extremely grateful and happy no Americans were harmed in last night's attack by the Iranian regime. We suffered no casualties, all of our soldiers are safe, and only minimal damage was sustained at our military bases. Our great American forces are prepared for anything. Iran appears to be standing down, which is a good thing for all parties concerned and a very good thing for the world. No American or Iraqi lives were lost because of the precautions taken, the dispersal of forces, and an early warning system that worked very well. I salute the incredible skill and courage of America's men and women in uniform." So apparently, not only good news for America that no American lives were lost, but also good news for the Trump administration because this strike was a miserable failure. And it's really telling of what Iran perceives to be their situation in dealing with America under the leadership of the Trump administration, and a Trump administration that is willing to draw, hard lines and is willing and currently reestablishing deterrence. Now, that being said about the airstrike, you have to understand what I said previously about Soleimani's role, Soleimani was Iran's equivalent to the head of the CIA, the Secretary of Defense, and Vice President, all rolled up into one guy. Now imagine this happened in the United States, right? Let's say somehow Iran had killed Vice President Pence, Secretary Pompeo, and the director of the intelligence agency whose name is and the director of the CIA whose name is now escaping me. Let's say they killed all three of those members, or let's say we had a position where Mike Pence was all three of those members, or Mark Esper was all three of those members. And, for all of the hysterics out there that World War III was starting, yes, it's very clear that Iran doesn't want war. And now the media, in their infinite wisdom, is walking out there saying that Iran is showing such restraint and not having this break out into all-out war. Yes, Iran is showing restraint in it not breaking out into all-out war by not killing American citizens, because they know 90 seconds into a World War III type conflict with the United States would decapitate not only their feeble navy and their military, but also their economy through more sanctions, and most likely the Ayatollah himself would end up decapitated. This isn't an apology for being the largest state sponsor of terrorism throughout the globe. This is the, oh my gosh, we understand now what the U.S. is capable of when it actually has leadership that is willing to stand up to our nonsense, and we're terrified of it. And good, they should be. And yes, Americans are safer if they are terrified of it. Trump goes on to say, for far too long, all the way back to 1979 to be exact, nations have tolerated Iran's destructive and destabilizing behavior in the Middle East and beyond. Absolutely right, especially during the Obama administration. In recent months alone, Iran has seized ships in international waters, fired an unprovoked strike on Saudi Arabia, and shot down 2 U.S. drones, President Trump said. And yes, this is exactly right. I went over this right at the beginning of Bradley's breakdown. Iran's hostilities substantially increased after the foolish Iran nuclear deal was signed in 2013, and they were given $150 billion, not to mention $1.8 billion in cash. Instead of saying thank you to the United States, they chanted death to America. In fact, they chanted death to America the day the agreement was signed. All of this is factually true. All of this is on record. I can't believe I have gone through nearly all of Trump's speech here without finding a single statement that I find factually dubious. He goes on to say, then Iran went on a terror spree funded by the money from the deal and created hell in Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, Afghanistan, and Iraq. The missiles fired last night at us and our allies were paid for with the funds made available by the last administration. Probably true, since they used that money to directly fund their ICBM program. The very defective JCPOA expires shortly anyway and gives Iran a clear and quick path to nuclear breakout. Absolutely true. It basically gave them a 10-year latency period, where their capabilities would just sit really unused and not enriched, and then instantly being able to enrich their uranium to weapons-grade uranium that they developed over the 10-year period. Trump goes on and says, the time has come for the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Russia, and China to recognize this reality. They must now break away from the remnants of the Iran deal, or JCPOA, and we must all work together towards making a deal with Iran that makes the world a safer and more peaceful place. We must also make a deal that allows Iran to thrive and prosper and take advantage of its enormous untapped potential. Iran can be a great country. Peace and stability cannot prevail in the Middle East as long as Iran continues to foment violence, unrest, hatred, and war. The civilized world must send a clear and unified message to the Iranian regime. Your campaign of terror, murder, mayhem will not be tolerated any longer. It will not be allowed to go forward. So again, good on President Trump. Not a lot of times you can get through and say there's not a shred of mistruth in this statement. And let's let these events serve as a reminder that American strength at home and abroad is truly a global force for good. So at the moment, this is where we are with regard to the Iranian issue. So now it's time to jump into Howl about that. But first, I got to tell you about more Leadership Institute trainings Yes, LI, the Leadership Institute, is having a campaign management workshop on January the 11th from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. This is exactly what you want to be learning how to do if you are a young individual who's looking for a job on a campaign or is going to be looking for a job on a campaign, maybe Trump campaign, maybe a congressperson in your area, come May or come whenever you graduate. So make sure, if you're interested, to go to www.leadershipinstitute.org/training to see all of their trainings that are offered. All right, that being said, it is time for How About That. And this week we are going to be featuring Nick Samarco's article titled Samarco, because he is a columnist. He gets his last name in front of everything he writes for Lone Conservative. So congratulations on that, Nick. But this one's titled Samarco, Some 2020 Predictions. Make sure to check this article out on loneconservative.com. So, of course, us being young politicos in training over at Lone Conservative, his first few predictions for 2020 are political. And, of course, it being a presidential election year, they are indeed electoral. Nick predicts that the Democratic National Convention will feature a brokered convention, resulting in Bernie Sanders winning the Democratic nomination for President of the United States. Now, I have to say, the first prediction is unlikely, but possible. It all depends on how Joe Biden launches, right? It's like young men hitting adolescence and early adulthood. There needs to be a takeoff. And if they don't, they'll more likely than not end up being losers for life, which is a sad truth. And, that's Joe Biden. Yes, he's old. Yes, there will be plenty more gaffes and slip-ups and possibly some hair sniffing. But all Joe Biden has to do is keep his campaign from drama and becoming a dumpster fire. And that's really his whole pitch for president. I'm old Joe. I'm stable. You know me. You've known me as a senator and as a vice president, and I will turn our country from the chaos of this administration towards the trajectory that we had in the Obama years. Hand it back over to the old guard, return to normalcy argument. There's a vast portion of the Democratic base that wants precisely the opposite. They want big structural change. Sure, voters want politicians to bring about large changes that they feel are an affront to American values, whether or not those values are leftist or conservative, right? Obama's slogan wasn't bring back the Clinton years, it was hope and change. Joe Biden is making the same pitch because politicians are mostly forced to, and maybe Joe Biden and his campaign think a lot of Americans, mostly left-leaning independents and Democrats, want to change back to normal. And in the middle of these two plans, normalcy and big structural change, is Pete Buttigieg. And if you're a liberal or a lefty listening to the show, for one, thank you. And good on you for listening to this podcast to prepare yourself for the real world and attempting to understand Americans with whom you disagree. But anyway, if you're a liberal listening to the show and want to return to Obama, Buttigieg is actually your guy. And that's what I think more highly educated Democrats, more white Democrats are realizing as the campaign goes on. And they're realizing it right now. He's incredibly radical on policy when you push him, but he's polished, handsome, eloquent, and intersectional. He's presidential. But then Nick goes on to predict that Bernie Sanders emerges and taps Stacey Abrams as his VP candidate, which, again, is possible given the amount of failing upward that's been happening in the Democratic Party lately, which is just absolutely astonishing to me. This is what you get when you constantly have the media trade winds to your back. It worked for Beto until the media realized he was an idiot. It's working for Stacey Abrams after she lost the gubernatorial race in Georgia, and it's happened to Cory Booker and Kamala Harris and many more who are supposed to be these fresh faces of the new American postmodern left. Now, for his last 2020 predictions, Nick says at the end of all this, Trump loses to Bernie. I don't think so. Now, I think he loses the popular vote again by 3 to 4 million, depending on who he matches up against. If it's Biden, probably more towards 4 million. But if it's Bernie Sanders, probably less than 3 millions. The left will continue to call the election of Donald Trump illegitimate. They will double down on scrapping the Electoral College, and they'll be nuts for another year, which, again, as I said earlier in the show, it's going to put some conservative students on college campuses in danger, as well as, you saw this with deranged leftists committing shootings on GOP Congress people inspired by Bernie Sanders. Obviously not the fault of Bernie Sanders, but nonetheless, this is the state of American politics. They'll be nuts for, another year or two until they impeach Donald Trump again, assuming the Democrats have the House, and or just start the countdown to 2024. To close out our show, it is time for the Warrior of the Week, and this Warrior of the Week is going to Justin Cool, who, he just wins Warrior of the Month. He wins Warrior of everything. Justin Cool is a firefighter, paramedic, student, and Marine veteran who set out on a 400-mile trek in December from his hometown of Columbus, Ohio, for Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia, right outside of D.C. This is Cool's third Forrest Gump-like trek to raise money to directly benefit veterans, their families, and Gold Star families. Before this trek, his previous efforts have already raised $115,000. He aimed to raise $20,000 on this 400-mile trek that ended in the first week of January, a fundraising goal he's still looking to meet. The money raised will go to help our military heroes and Save a Warrior organization. If you're already inspired by Justin's efforts and want to donate online, go to March for Our Vets Facebook page and click on the Learn More tab that will direct you to the website. Justin, you are doing amazing work, and you've inspired me. You've inspired the Elephant in the Room team. You've inspired everyone at Lone Conservative and millions of Americans across the country. So thank you for your service in the military, and thank you for your continued service as a firefighter, a paramedic, and hopefully eventually someone in public service, in management and policy. You truly have an unbelievable servant's heart, and we are so pleased to give you this Warrior of the Week. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have people that you want to nominate for Warrior of the Week, tweet it at me, tweet it at the Elephant in the Room podcast, direct message me, direct message the Elephant in the Room podcast for a chance for that individual to receive the Warrior of the Week. Thank you so much for listening to the 8th episode of the Elephant in the Room. We are so happy to be back. I'm Bradley Devlin. Until next time.